Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The raw, guttural scream of "You left my daughter with nothing" that tore from Arthur Pendleton's throat was not merely a line of dialogue, it was the seismic event that shattered the pristine, gold-plated facade of the Kensington family. A tremor that would expose the rotten foundations upon which their immense fortune and carefully curated reputation were built. This script, a masterclass in the architecture of melodrama, operates on the principle of a pressure cooker, introducing a cast of characters so steeped in secrets, greed, and unresolved trauma that the eventual explosion is both terrifying and cathartically inevitable. At its heart lies the seemingly simple, yet profoundly unjust, premise of Liam Kensington's final, shocking bequest. The man, a titan of industry whose presence had dominated boardrooms and family dinners with equal force, lay cold in his casket, but his will served as a final, posthumous act of manipulation, a grenade rolled into the center of his grieving, or perhaps, pre-grieving, loved ones. The reading of the will, a classic trope reinvigorated here with venomous intent, is the catalyst. The opulent lawyer's office, all dark wood and leather, becomes a gladiatorial arena. Seated are the expectant heirs, Victoria, Liam's elegant but ice-cold widow, whose composure is a mask welded to her face, Ethan, the ambitious and perpetually insecure son, already mentally spending his inheritance on a hostile takeover of his father's company, and then, the outsiders, the disruption, Kelly, a young, unassuming woman whose connection to the family is a mystery to all, and Arthur, her father, whose working-class clothes and calloused hands mark him as an alien in this world of inherited privilege. The lawyer, a man whose voice seems to have been aged in a cask of legal precedent and other people's misfortunes, begins to drone. Minor bequests are dispensed, enough to keep Victoria in couture and Ethan in sports cars, but the core of the empire, the controlling shares of Kensington Corporation, the sprawling estate, the vast liquid assets, is not going to them. With a dry, unemotional finality, the lawyer reveals that Liam has left everything, the entirety of his monumental wealth and power, to Kelly. The silence that follows is not peaceful, it is a vacuum, sucking all the air from the room before the inevitable implosion. Victoria's face, a masterpiece of cosmetic maintenance, does not crack, it freezes, her eyes becoming chips of flint. Ethan's reaction is more volcanic, a sputtered denial, a half-rise from his chair, his face mottling with a rage that is equal parts financial and filial betrayal. He was the son, the heir apparent, the one who had spent his life jumping through hoops of fire to earn a modicum of his father's approval, and now, it was all handed to a virtual stranger. But the most potent reaction comes from Arthur. He is not driven by greed for himself, his is a purer, more terrifying fury born of paternal love and a history of pain known only to him. He doesn't care about the money for its own sake, he sees it as the ultimate insult, a final, grotesque parody of justice. His scream, "You left my daughter with nothing," is not about the present moment, but about the past. It is the key that the audience immediately understands will unlock the central mystery of the entire narrative: who is Kelly, and what profound debt does Liam Kensington owe her? The script then masterfully unpacks this mystery through a series of expertly paced flashbacks and present-day confrontations. We learn that Kelly is not a random beneficiary, she is the daughter of Liam's first and only true love, a woman named Eleanor, whom Arthur had loved as well. The backstory is a poignant tragedy in itself. Decades earlier, a young, ambitious Liam had been torn between his heart and his destiny. Eleanor was vibrant, artistic, and wholly separate from the world of corporate intrigue his family demanded he inhabit. Their love was intense and real, but when Liam's father threatened to disinherit him, to shatter the dynastic dreams laid out since his birth, Liam made the coward's choice. He abandoned a pregnant Eleanor, marrying the socially advantageous Victoria instead, building his empire on the grave of his own happiness. Eleanor, heartbroken and cast aside, eventually found solace with Arthur, a kind, steady man who loved her and raised Kelly as his own, even though he knew the biological truth. Eleanor never fully recovered from Liam's betrayal, and her life was marked by a quiet sorrow, a struggle with illness that her and Arthur's modest means could only partially alleviate. She died years before the present-day events, and on her deathbed, she made Arthur swear to never reveal Kelly's true parentage, to protect her from the corrupting influence of the Kensington wealth and the man who had rejected them. This is the nothing Arthur screams about. Liam left them with nothing, no support, no acknowledgement, no help during Eleanor's illness, no shred of the vast resources that could have eased her suffering. He left them with the emotional nothingness of his abandonment, a void that shaped Kelly's entire life without her even knowing it. Therefore, the inheritance is not an act of generosity in Liam's mind, but one of desperate, belated atonement. The script cleverly reveals Liam's perspective through a series of private diary entries and conversations with his confidant, his old and ailing business partner, Charles. We see that the powerful, ruthless Liam Kensington was, in private, a haunted man. The empire he built felt like a gilded cage. His marriage to Victoria was a transactional frost, a union of mutual convenience that produced Ethan but no warmth. He watched his son become a mirror of his own worst qualities, ambitious, cynical, and devoid of empathy. In his final years, racked with illness and regret, Liam came to see his success as the price he paid for his soul, and he saw in Kelly, from a distance, the daughter he should have had, the living embodiment of the life he should have lived. He hired private investigators to track her, learning of her kind heart, her work as a teacher, her simple, principled life. She was everything his world was not, genuine, compassionate, and untainted by greed. The will was his monstrous, flawed, yet profoundly human attempt to right a cosmic wrong. He wasn't just giving her money, he was anointing her as his true heir, not just of his fortune, but of his legacy, hoping that her goodness could purify the corrupt empire he had created. He was trying, from beyond the grave, to buy the redemption his life had lacked. This sets the stage for the war declared in the lawyer's office. The script's title, Liam's Secret Exposed, thus operates on multiple levels. The most obvious exposure is Kelly's true parentage, a bombshell that Arthur, in a fit of rage, eventually hurls at a stunned Victoria and Ethan. "She's his daughter, you fools!" His real daughter, he roars, and the revelation lands like a live wire. For Victoria, it is the ultimate humiliation, proof that her entire marriage was a lie and that her husband's true affections had always belonged to another woman. For Ethan, it is an existential threat far greater than a simple disinheritance, it undermines his very identity. If he is not the true heir, then who is he? His entire sense of self was built upon being Liam Kensington's son, and now that foundational pillar has been smashed to dust. This exposure of biological truth is the first secret, but the second, more insidious exposure is that of Liam's character itself. The public image of the stalwart, infallible patriarch is torn down, revealing the weak, regretful man beneath. The third exposure is that of the other characters' true natures under pressure. Victoria, stripped of her social armor, reveals a core of pure, calculating steel, willing to use any means to reclaim what she sees as rightfully hers. Ethan's ambition curdles into a toxic, violent desperation. The ensuing battle is fought on multiple fronts. The legal front is a brutal, no-holds-barred contestation of the will. Victoria and Ethan hire a team of pit bull lawyers who launch a multi-pronged attack. They question Liam's mental state, suggesting he was coerced or delusional in his final days. They dig into Kelly's past, looking for any scrap of dirt to paint her as an opportunistic gold digger, and they exploit Arthur's simmering anger, trying to turn him against the entire process, hoping he will convince Kelly to simply walk away. The corporate front is equally treacherous. Ethan, using his remaining shares and his position within Kensington Corporation, attempts to stage a coup, rallying the old guard board members who are suspicious of this unknown young woman suddenly being thrust into power. He plants stories in the press, questioning her competence and integrity, turning the court of public opinion against her. Meanwhile, Kelly is utterly overwhelmed. She never wanted this fortune or this fight. She is grieving for a father she never knew, grappling with the betrayal of her mother's secret, and trying to reconcile the image of the monstrous man who abandoned them with the repentant figure revealed in his diaries. Her relationship with Arthur becomes strained. He wants her to reject the blood money, to spit on Liam's memory, but Kelly feels a confusing pull of curiosity and a sense of responsibility. She is, after all, her father's daughter, and she begins to see the company not as a prize, but as a responsibility, a monstrous entity that perhaps she can tame, that she can force to do some good in the world. The script's genius lies in its character arcs, particularly Kelly's transformation. She begins as a passive victim of this dynastic earthquake, but gradually, she finds a steel within herself that she inherited from both her fathers, the moral fortitude from Arthur and the strategic cunning from Liam. With the help of a few unlikely allies, including the ailing Charles, who saw the good in Liam that others missed, and a cynical but brilliant young lawyer named Ben who is drawn to her authenticity, Kelly begins to fight back. She doesn't just want to win, she wants to redefine what winning means. She starts learning the business, not from a place of greed, but from a desire to understand the machine her biological father built. She discovers shady deals, cut corners, and ethical compromises that form the bedrock of the Kensington fortune, and she realizes that Ethan's plans for the company would only amplify its worst qualities. The internal conflict becomes her central struggle, to honor the complex, flawed man who was her father by dismantling the worst parts of his legacy while saving the rest, all while battling the living embodiments of that legacy who are now her sworn enemies. The emotional core of the script, however, remains the father-daughter relationship between Kelly and Arthur. Their scenes are charged with a painful love. He is terrified of losing her to this world of wealth and lies, and she is desperate to prove to him that she can navigate it without losing the values he instilled in her. A climactic scene between them, where Kelly explains that she cannot simply walk away from the chance to do real, tangible good with this cursed fortune, is a heart-wrenching moment of a child outgrowing a parent's protection, of love being tested by a painful new reality. The final act builds to a breathtaking confluence of legal, corporate, and personal showdowns. The will contestation reaches its trial, where Victoria and Ethan's case begins to unravel as their own deceptions come to light. Meanwhile, Ethan's corporate coup is set for the same day as the trial's climax. The script crosscuts between the sterile, wordy battlefield of the courtroom and the tense, high-stakes boardroom, creating a riveting pace. The ultimate Liam's secret exposed moment comes not from Arthur, but from Kelly herself. On the witness stand, under brutal cross-examination, she does not break. Instead, she weaponizes the truth. She reveals not only her parentage but also reads from Liam's diaries, exposing his profound regret and his specific fears about Ethan's unfitness to lead. She then unveils her own discovery, evidence of Ethan's pre-inheritance embezzlement and his plans to asset-strip the company, a betrayal far greater than Liam's posthumous bequest. This is the masterstroke. It exposes Ethan's venality completely, turning the board against him and eviscerating his case in court. Victoria, seeing her son utterly destroyed and her own position irrevocably lost, has a final, quiet scene with Kelly where a sliver of understanding passes between them, two women who were, in different ways, victims of the same man. In the end, Kelly prevails. She gains control of the company and the fortune. But the victory is Pyrrhic and profound. The mansion feels empty, the fortune feels tainted. The script does not end with a simple happy ending. Ethan is defeated and disgraced, perhaps facing criminal charges. Victoria retreats to a life of bitter exile. The true resolution is between Kelly and Arthur. In the final scene, they are not in a boardroom or a mansion, but back in the modest, warm home where she was raised. The Kensington Empire is now her burden and her tool, but this house, with him in it, remains her home. She assures him that she is still his daughter, that the money changes nothing about who she is. She outlines her plans to reform the company, to create foundations in her mother's name, to use the wealth for good, to build something, rather than simply possess it. Arthur looks at her, seeing the ghost of the woman he loved in her eyes, but also seeing the strong, principled woman she has become, and he finally, slowly, nods. It is an acceptance, a passing of the torch, and a quiet victory for love over legacy, for the future over the past. The scream of "You left my daughter with nothing," has finally been answered, not with more nothing, but with everything, not just material wealth, but with truth, with purpose, and with the unshakable bond of a father's love that was there all along. The script, in its 4,000-word journey, proves that the most dramatic inheritances are not of money, but of identity, responsibility, and the power to redefine a legacy from one of shame into one of hope. The gavel's crack, a sound as sharp and final as a bone breaking, echoed through the opulent, wood-paneled chamber, but it was Arthur Pendleton's raw, guttural scream of "You left my daughter with nothing." That truly shattered the world. This was not mere dialogue, it was a seismic event, a pressure release of 2 decades of festering grief and rage that tore through the pristine, gold-plated facade of the Kensington dynasty, exposing the rotten foundations upon which their immense fortune and meticulously curated reputation were built. This script, a masterclass in the architecture of high-stakes melodrama, operates with the terrifying, inevitable logic of a classical tragedy, introducing a cast of characters so steeped in secrets, unquenchable greed, and unresolved trauma that the eventual explosion feels both terrifying and cathartically earned. At its heart lies the seemingly simple, yet profoundly unjust, premise of Liam Kensington's final, shocking bequest. The man himself, a titan of industry whose presence had dominated boardrooms and family dinners with equal, formidable force, lay cold in his casket of polished mahogany, but his last will and testament served as a final, posthumous act of manipulation, a grenade rolled directly into the center of his grieving, or perhaps, more accurately, his pre-grieving, loved ones. The reading of the will, a classic trope reinvigorated here with venomous intent, is the meticulously laid fuse that ignites the entire narrative. The setting itself is a character, the lawyer's office, a temple of wealth with its walls of dark, solemn wood, smell of old leather and lemon polish, and portraits of stern-faced patriarchs staring down in silent judgment, becomes a gladiatorial arena where blood is soon to be spilled, both metaphorically and almost literally. Seated around the vast, obsidian-like desk are the expectant heirs, each a study in suppressed tension. Victoria Kensington, Liam's elegant widow, is a sculpture of composure, her black Chanel suit impeccable, her pearls a perfect, cold white against her throat, her face a mask of dignified sorrow that feels as thin and fragile as antique porcelain. To her right sits Ethan, their son, the ambitious and perpetually insecure heir apparent, whose restless fingers drum a silent, anxious rhythm on his knee. One can already see the calculations flickering behind his eyes, the corporate acquisitions, the fleet of supercars, the total and final victory over a father whose approval he could never quite secure. And then, the outsiders, the disruptive variables in this carefully balanced equation of inheritance. Kelly, a young woman whose simple, unadorned dress and gentle, uncertain demeanor mark her as an alien in this world of inherited privilege, and beside her, Arthur, her father. Arthur's presence is a physical dissonance in the room, his working man's hands, calloused and etched with the grime of a lifetime of honest labor, rest awkwardly on his knees, his suit ill-fitting, bought for a funeral and screaming of a different, more practical reality. He is the ghost at the feast, the living, breathing embodiment of a life and a debt the Kensingtons have long since chosen to forget. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Thorne whose voice seems to have been aged in a cask of legal precedent and the quiet schadenfreude of witnessing other people's misfortunes, begins to drone. He dispenses with the minor bequests like a dealer handing out chips, a generous trust fund for Victoria, enough to maintain her palaces and her pampered existence, a vice presidency and a portfolio of non-voting shares for Ethan, a bone throne to keep him occupied but ultimately powerless. The air in the room thickens with a sense of impending revelation. Then, Thorne clears his throat, adjusts his spectacles, and delivers the sentence that changes everything. The core of the Kensington Empire, the controlling 52% shares of Kensington Corporation, the sprawling, clifftop estate known as the Eyrie, the vast, labyrinthine network of liquid assets, offshore holdings, and art collections valued in the hundreds of millions, is not, as everyone assumed, to be divided between the widow and the son. In a dry, unemotional tone utterly devoid of drama, he reveals that Liam has left everything, the entirety of his monumental wealth and power, to Kelly Marie Pendleton. The silence that follows is not peaceful, it is a vacuum, sucking all the oxygen from the room, leaving the occupants gasping in a void of disbelief before the inevitable, violent implosion. Victoria's face does not crack, it freezes, her eyes becoming chips of Arctic flint, her lips pressed into a bloodless line. The mask does not slip, it petrifies. Ethan's reaction is more volcanic, a sputtered, this is absurd. A typo, a half-rise from his chair as if to physically challenge the document, his face mottling with a rage that is equal parts financial and profound, filial betrayal. He was the son, the heir, the one who had spent his life jumping through hoops of fire, molding himself in his father's ruthless image, all to earn a modicum of approval, and now, it was all handed to a virtual stranger, a girl who looked like she couldn't command a coffee order, let alone a multinational conglomerate. But the most potent, the most soul-shattering reaction, comes from Arthur. He does not care about the stock portfolios or the penthouse apartments. He is not driven by greed for himself, his is a purer, more terrifying fury, forged in the fires of paternal love and a history of pain known only to him. He lurches to his feet, his chair scraping backwards like a gunshot, and his finger, thick and accusatory, stabs towards the lawyer, towards Liam's ghost, towards this entire corrupt edifice. His scream, "You left my daughter with nothing," is not about the present moment, not about the billions now bearing her name, it is about the past. It is a key the audience immediately understands will unlock the central, festering mystery of the entire narrative. Who is Kelly, and what profound, life-crushing debt does the ghost of Liam Kensington owe her? The script then masterfully, painstakingly unpacks this mystery through a series of expertly paced flashbacks and present-day confrontations that feel less like exposition and more like an archaeological dig into a buried trauma. We learn that Kelly is not a random beneficiary, not a late-in-life fling, she is the daughter of Liam's first and only true love, a vibrant, fiercely independent